African heads of states are gathered in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia for the 36th African Union Summit. The International Crisis Group believes leaders should focus on 8 priorities, and these include bolstering the AU's institutional capacity, steering diplomacy in the Central African Republic, and supporting the DRC's elections. For more on this, we're joined by Louw-Vaudran, a senior advisor on the African Union at the International Crisis Group. Liesl, a great pleasure. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. In trying to measure the impact of the African Union, which is oftentimes ill-spoken of, perhaps help us understand how it is funded in order for it to achieve that which it sets out to do.
Yes, afternoon, Dudu. Thanks for having me. It is true. I think you've noted one of the more sensitive issues around the African Union, because the funding remains an outstanding priority. We had a summit here in Sandton a long time ago, 2015, if you remember, where there was a commitment from heads of state that Africa should fund the African Union and its activities at, 100% of its operational issues, like paying employees in Addis Ababa, 75% of its programs, and then 25% of its peace and security operations. Now, if you look at the 2023 budget, there is unfortunately still over 60%, 66% of the total budget that is funded by partners, and that has implications across the board of everything the African Union does. I must say it has made some progress with this peace fund that was created. The aim was for $400 million, and that has now almost been achieved. So that means the African Union, $400 million is not that much, but it can send mediators like it's done now in Ethiopia, the peace deal that was signed here in Pretoria at the end of last year, issues like that. So it's slow progress, and especially now that we have this international context of the war in Ukraine and so on, where Africa needs to be independent. The African Union needs to be an independent voice for the continent. So this is really still an outstanding issue.
Not only does it need to be an independent voice for the continent, but they also have to sort out institutional problems, which sees the organization bleeding when it comes to people who really want to make an impact on the continent.
That is true. I mean, I've been following the African Union since the OAU times, and there has been a lot of progress in the last 20 years. Younger people, more efficiency, people being based on merit, 55 member states. So each member state has a quota. There's the francophones and the anglophones. So it's not an easy thing, as I said, there have been a lot of progress, but for example, the merger of the political affairs, peace and security department, which are really the key, one of the key issues, the African Union needs to deal with peace and security, has been, let's say, it's still work in progress. So at this summit, in any event, the African Union heads of state are going to have to look at the implementation of the AU reforms that is led by Rwandan President Paul Kagame, among the many other issues that it has to look at. But for the African Union to lead initiatives, it really needs to get its house in order.
Speaking of getting its house in order, what happened to the AU's panel of the wise, especially when you speak on the security issue, right? We're always also petitioning the UN Security Council to give an African country a permanent seat because the majority of the issues that they discuss have to do with conflict on this continent.
Absolutely. That is one issue that is on the agenda of the summit, that is Saturday and Sunday, the UN Security Council reform. And somehow the international context have given new impetus to that issue, and Africa's request for at least one seat. Officially, according to what they call the Esselweni consensus, Africa wants 2 seats, which currently, with all the other countries vying for that, might be too much. But in any event, so the Ukraine war, the attention shifted a bit to the UN General Assembly, and there was almost surprise that the African bloc has got 54 members of the UN, so the votes count. So that there is greater impetus now for that. Peace and security, as you say, it's a huge issue, and there are often times good synergy between the AU and the UN and then regional bodies. It has been the case with issues such as, Sudan and others. Tomorrow, the 17th, President Cyril Ramaphosa will be chairing a meeting of heads of state of the Peace and Security Council on the Great Lakes, DRC, which is also very important. The UN Secretary General Guterres might be there. He's been invited. So sometimes, there's good synergy, but Africa ideally would like to be taken more seriously in New York at the UN Security Council.
I do beg your pardon, but perhaps we also do need to take ourselves seriously. I mean, right now you think of the situation in the DRC or between the DRC and Rwanda, right? This tit for tat or he said, she said, where the M23 insurgency is concerned. What is being done about that? It's one thing to have the issue on the agenda, but to actually see or hear things that are moving, to quell tensions. The DRC has been in turmoil for as long as we can remember, and so nothing seems, at least on the face of it, to be done.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I know that people are very skeptical of these efforts and all these meetings, but so the aim of this gathering tomorrow is to ease tensions between Rwanda and the DRC that have been mounting. And as you say, the M23 is now a new threat to the Eastern DRC. Rwanda is being accused of funding them. The UN reports even confirm that. So the aim would be to avert a direct interstate conflict between Rwanda and the DRC, which, been able to avert these last couple of years at least. But as you say, people are being, especially when it comes to the Great Lakes and the Eastern DRC and the DRC altogether, it's such an important country with huge potential, especially now when it comes to the energy transition, etc., that solving that and saving lives and making sure people are safe and can go on with, not being eternally displaced, does make one a little despondent, but right. So what's being done? The East African community, led by Kenya, is deploying some forces to at least protect Goma, which is the big capital there in the east. It has been fairly successful. The UN also has troops. A South African soldier was killed not too long ago in trying to also, save lives in that part of the continent. It's a very, very lucrative area for mining, for all kinds of resources, which also raises the stakes, I think, in the Eastern DRC. So the AU has to show that it is playing an important role.
Because one of the unintended consequences of that, as you touched on, is the issue of migration and people being displaced and being moved around. And the theme this year is the year of AfCFTA, acceleration of the African Continental Free Trade Area implementation. With many countries on the continent having ratified this, very few have actually moved on the free movement of persons, including South Africa. And so does this then remain a pie-in-the-sky dream?
Yes, that's the irony of the African Continental Free Trade Area, where there have been a lot of movement, and I must say, really it is something that could propel the African states, Africa as a whole, into a whole new development era. The Commissioner for Trade, Albert Muchanga, at the African Union actually spoke yesterday about, how the African Continental Free Trade Area will accelerate Africa's development. It is true, South Africa has a lot to benefit from that, being one of the most industrialized countries that actually export to the rest. These small countries that don't export, can be more vulnerable. But as you say, and as we've noted in our crisis group report as well, to really make a difference, it will have to be possible for people to travel. We need to get this African passport that was announced way back, I think in 2016, so that you, as an African citizen, can travel to Ethiopia or to Senegal or wherever with your African passport. Then, that issue is very, very tricky, especially for South Africa, that is one of the host countries of migrants coming in, because it's considered an El Dorado for them to get jobs and so on. Very, very tricky, but it's going to have to be the long-term plan as well, together with the Continental Free Trade Area.
Yeah, absolutely understandable, right? Because you do want people to get their houses in order, so that all of these other good things, like being an African and being able to travel the continent without having visa restrictions or fees that go with it, can become a little bit easier as well. Louw-Vaudran is a senior advisor on the African Union at the International Crisis Group. Thank you.